Well, it's almost the end of March, so welcome back to the shop. Now, I haven't done a lot of progress on the engine. In order to install the oil sending unit, I need to use an extension because this car has an oil pressure gauge, right? It gives me a gauge, not just a light. Now the gauge is a rather large sending unit, which means they actually use this extender to get that gauge away from the block. Well, this one that came with the car, and I guess it's about 50 years old, is in rough shape. It's stripped at the top here. It doesn't give me a good seal, and when it does finally try to start sealing, this is rotated incorrectly and it gets in the way of the oil filter, right? So again, cart before the horse. So I've ordered a new one of these. And it'll be here in about 5-6 days, so that of course stops me from putting in my fuel pump, which stops me from getting my power steering pump all done, and yada 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 yada. Now I did install the carburetor, I got the throttle linkage connected, I got some of the hoses in, but again, like I said, just ancillary stuff until I can wait for the one piece that I need before I can really start getting this all together. So what I thought I would do is let's start working on the wiring. Right, and so let me show you some of the things I've been doing now as far as wiring this car with all the additional electrical stuff that it has, right? The power seats, the power windows, the power roof, the amplifier in the trunk. Like I said, so how do we wire all of that? So let me show you. Okay, let's start at the beginning. So the distribution block, right? This is just a car audio part. You can get this at any electronics store that sells car audio. It is simply a positive terminal that has multiple outputs that I can then connect multiple wires to it without having to use one of those old lead ones where you have to put them all together and try to get it together. Obviously, first thing we have coming off the side of it is a 4 gauge, which is driving directly to the starter and then or the solenoid, and then of course the other side will go down to the starter. On the other side, I got a 4 gauge. That 4 gauge is coming down to a distribution block. Now, what this is doing here is this is going to be a couple of 50 amp fuses. One is going to be run off of the fuse block. Remember how I'm rewiring this car. I'm going to bring additional power in directly into the fuse block. Now, my fuse block is rated at 100 amps. And each circuit can have a maximum of 30 amps. There's nothing in this car that's going to pull 30 amps other than the amplifier. So this, you can see it's 2. One of them is driving the 50 amp fuse, which is for the entire car. So if I ever have a system failure, this 50 will pop. The other 50 is driving a cable in here as well. So these 2 cables, one runs in obviously to the fuse block, and the other one runs into the trunk, which of course is powering the amplifier. So as far as the electrical wiring up in here, as I said, I'm going to have a single wire on my alternator. So it's just going to charge the battery directly. I don't need a regulator anymore, so I will eliminate the regulator. When you're thinking about a car audio system, you have to be very cognizant of where you're going to run your RCA line so you don't get crosstalk. So let me explain what that means, and let me show you how I've run the power lines in this car. Okay, wiring. So from under the hood, I'm bringing in 2 lines. The first line, as I mentioned, is going to the fuse box, right? That's my new power source. That is going to deliver power for the roof, for the windows, for the seats. The other line that came in is going into the trunk because it is running the amplifier equalizer, and we'll get into that in a minute. The other thing that I'm running down here, of course, is the RCA jack. Now this is going from the head unit, and it goes into the back, into the trunk as well, but it connects to the equalizer. The reason I'm running this over here with the power line is because you have to be very careful in a car stereo system if you're running RCA, especially when you're running the length of the car. Although this is a high quality RCA cable, it can still be influenced by other sources. Let's say I ran my speaker wires in the same track as I run my RCA. When you're listening to your music, those speaker wires are carrying a high voltage AC current, right? That's how speakers work, right? They work by modulating between plus and minus. The speaker cone goes in and out based on the frequency. And in the front stage here on my audio system, I'm going to be running everything from about 200 hertz and up. So that's a high frequency. So that'll be high frequencies going through those speaker cables. if they're trapped up against the RCA, they can actually induce noise into the RCA signal, and you can start getting a feedback. It's called crosstalk. It's the idea that you can actually get noise coming from those speaker lines into the RCA. But it's not just the speaker wires that can affect the RCA. What can also affect the RCA is if you're running power wires beside the RCA that run a motor, let's say. Motors are very noisy. So if I would pull the roof and get the roof to go up or go down, that noise would be induced along the power line that goes to that motor. And if that power line was near the RCA, it would induce noise onto the RCA. Even brake lights or signal lights, because they're intermittent, they are on, off, what happens is that induces, again, noise in the RCA. So the RCA is on this side, of course the power's to the amp is here as well. I don't mind so much that the power is running by the RCA, because in my case I've got a simple setup in the trunk, single amplifier, single equalizer. This is just going to be a steady current draw. It is not going to induce anything on my RCA, although in the old days I wouldn't have done this either. I would have run the power lines underneath the car, but I'd be feeding multiple amps at that time. So I'm okay with this. But like I said, everything else has got to go on that side. But from this point of view, I mean, I've got the wiring harnesses already going in. I'm feeding that through. I had to put in the wiper motor only because of fitment, right? I'm going to pull the wiper motor back out. There's a huge bracket, and they bring the wiring right around it. It's silly, but again, so I've done that. So I'm just getting the cabling in, brake light switch in, tying up some of the wiring. I'm going to start now wiring in all the AC stuff, right? Because this is all part of the AC. So it's got to run that way. So there's a lot of wiring to do. Probably about a week of just doing this and getting this done. But why don't we get into the trunk and let's see what I've done back there. Okay, before we go into the trunk, just to show you, I mean, I've already pre-drilled all the holes for the, remember this was a new deck lid. So of course I had to drill all these holes. I don't know what's easier. You've got the glue-on Mustang lettering, or you've got the ones with the pins. I went with the pins. All right, let's look inside the trunk. So first thing you're going to notice is the floor, right? So what I did is this is 5/8 inch plywood, and it is wrapped in carpet. It has a perimeter gasket of about 1 inch thick, and that's holding this up above the gas tank. Remember, in these cars, the floor of your trunk is your gas tank. Now the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be carpeting all this as well, but I'm not going to carpet it because I'm in here with a spray gun, right? I've still got to do that. So I'm going to be carpeting these, and you know, this comes out, of course, it's temporary, but now what you'll notice in the back is the amplifier board, and I've always put these in my cars. A little bit more of a challenge with convertible, because you have to worry about the roof coming down. You also have a convertible well. It is a waterproof well that goes in there anyways to make sure no water gets into the trunk. So again, I got to make sure that's in there. But simple board, 1/2 inch plywood wrapped in a blue vinyl. The speaker wires and all the wires come from behind, and then they only pop out where they actually connect to the unit. Now to start this, for some nostalgia, this is my 1/2 octave Equalizer that I've had for 35 years. This is the only thing left of my original car audio system that I had back when I was a young lad. And I thought, you know what, for some nostalgia, I'll put that back in the car. It really allows you to tune everything. And if you're trying to get a front stage and you have your speakers up in front, you're trying to control the frequencies to the speakers, because nothing kills a speaker more than giving it a frequency that it's not rated for. You know, so even though my front speakers are good quality speakers, you know, if I'm going to drive 30 hertz and 40 hertz signals into them, I'm going to blow them up, right? So this allows me to split that out. Now at the same time, I can split that out and then drive a subwoofer that is going to take care of those low frequencies. So I went with a Rockford Fosgate. Now I had a lot of experience with these amplifiers in my youth. Even though in the other car I'm running a JL audio, but that's because that car, I need something to overpower the exhaust. This is a cruiser. It's going to just have a nice rumble to it, and you know, I don't need anything with a lot of power, but I would love something that has some nice clean sound. So with the Rockford, the nice thing about it is that I can extend the range at the lower ends with that amplifier. So I can split them out here. I can boost them slightly here, but the Fosgate allows me to really control those low frequencies, and again, important when you're running smaller speakers up front. But basically, what I'm going to be doing over the next week is I'm going to wire the whole car. I'm going to make sure all the wiring is good. I'm going to have to replace wiring where it's bad. I'm going to get the signal lights. I'm going to get the tail lights, the backup lights. I'm going to get the the backup camera. I'm going to get the headlights and the marker lights and everything connected and powered up, right? Because the car is painted. I mean, the car is 100% painted in 2K. Now it hasn't been flattened at all. But the idea is that, next step will be working on the body. So what I want to do is make sure everything else is good. I'm also expecting my transmission mount. I've got my drive shaft. Now I had to get that shortened. As you know, I went to a T5, which is a longer transmission. The output shaft is longer on the T5. Now the good news is that the input shaft of the drive shaft actually works on the T5, and it's exactly the same as it was on my C4, so I didn't have to get a new yoke anyways. So drive shaft's ready. As soon as my mount's in, I'll be able to mount the transmission. I'll be able to put the drive shaft in. I'll have the wiring done by then. We'll actually start the car. We'll get the car running. We'll break it in. Remember, this engine has been rebuilt, so we got to do a break-in. And as I said, over the next week, I got power windows to put in. I got a lot of stuff coming up. So looking forward to making those videos for you. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, and I'll see you again from the shop.